Thank you, Mara. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Language Connections, Tips to Create, Maintain, and Present Non-English Digital Content. With us today is Mike Muley, Attorney Advisor of the Civil Rights Division in the Federal Coordination and Compliance section of the Department of Justice. And he will talk about the new guide, Improving Access to Public Websites and Digital Services for Limited English Proficiency Persons, that he and his colleagues in an interagency working group created. And that working group is in the LEP subcommittee of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So Mike is an old friend of this community and a frequent collaborator. He has been in this space for a number of years, and you can spot him often answering questions and sharing relevant resources on the listserv. Many of you, I'm sure, know him. I want to keep this brief, so a few reminders after the presentation. You will have a chance to ask questions, so please feel free to add your questions on the chat box, as Mara, I think, mentioned already, so we can collect them to moderate the conversation. And with that, I'm just going to pass it on to Mike.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Let me just get these slides up here so everyone can see them, and we can get started. Great. I want to make sure everyone can see those. Looks like it's good. Yep. Okay. So today we're going to talk about, like Laura said, language connections, tips to create, maintain, and present non-English digital content. And on the first slide here, I just want to give a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. It's brief, but there's three key topics. And on this first slide, I just want to talk about the importance of this topic and the communities it impacts. We all use websites and digital services to provide information to the public, to accept applications, and to manage accounts. And digital services involve, when we're using that phrase, it involves the electronic delivery of information over the internet, including data and content across multiple platforms or devices such as text, audio, video, mobile applications, and graphics. And it's important to make sure that limited English proficient persons, or LEP persons, have meaningful access to vital information in their language on those websites and digital services that we create and maintain. Based on federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and executive orders, many agencies and other entities are required to take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access for LEP individuals. And that's the frame for what we're going to talk about today. Specifically, to give an overview of the three topics, they're all based on a guide that the LEP Committee of the Federal Title VI Interagency Working Group created. It gathered ideas, resources, and examples and issued the guide. The image of the guide is on this first slide here in December 2021, so just a couple months ago. And the goal was to help anyone seeking to improve language access to their websites and digital services. Above the image of the guide on this first slide here, you'll see a short link which will take you directly to the PDF version of the guide. But this presentation, which is based on that guide, covers three key topics. First, ideas and considerations for content in other languages. Second, examples of features to support multilingual content. And third, resources with additional information about these topics. The guide, which you can access using that short link shown on this slide, includes more information on each of these topics, and it also includes additional examples. On the second slide here, we're going to talk about ideas. The guide addresses ideas and considerations when creating or assessing content in languages other than English. And these ideas we're going to cover today include understanding machine translation, signs of trouble, best practices for providing multilingual content, effective design strategies, And lastly, the importance of usability testing with LEP persons. So we're going to cover these 4 topics next. First, machine translation. And at the outset, it's really important to understand what machine translation means when you're talking about especially access to websites and digital services for limited English proficient or LEP users. Machine translation refers to a variety of applications or software that convert written text or content from one language to another without the involvement of a competent human translator. What is a competent human translator? I'm going to cover that now. A competent human translator is a highly trained individual who is able to render text from a source language into a target language while preserving the meaning, and also an individual who adheres to generally accepted translator ethics and principles, including confidentiality. If machine translation is used, you will need to have a competent human translator proofread all content containing vital information to ensure the accuracy of that content before it is posted to your website or other digital services or social media accounts. I think it's important to cover machine translation first because there's several references to it in the guide and also in the slides we're going to cover today. On this next slide, we're going to go over, on slide 4 here, we're going to go over signs of trouble. There are a few signs of trouble to consider when assessing translated content. First, content is translated in other languages, but the directions that explain how to access that translated content are only provided in English. For example, a website explains in English that you can access a Korean version of the complaint form by clicking a link. But the information and the text of that link is not written in Korean, just to give you an example. Secondly, using automated translation only instead of the services of a qualified human translator. For example, the website or your website might have a button that allows a user to select a non-English language, and the machine translation application automatically translates that content. But that's instead of having a competent human translator provide a professional translation of vital English content in that non-English language. The last example, which is covered in the guide in more detail, voicemail menus or customer service lines or phone numbers are not accessible to LEP persons because they are only recorded in English. For example, a website might have a phone number at the bottom of the page or somewhere on the page. But when a Mandarin-speaking caller calls after business hours, they don't know how to leave a voicemail message because all of the voicemail instructions are only in English. Next, I'm going to talk about, on slide 5 here, best practices for developing websites and digital services. Multilingual notices inform LEP persons about the availability of free interpreters and translated materials, and explain how to request them in a language that LEP individual can understand. This includes translated notices in prominent locations on main pages of websites that explain the process to request an interpreter or interpreter services or translated materials. Another best practice includes placing a translated notice that indicates when a link leads to English-only content. For example, when a user is already on a page that has content only in the Russian language, that's written in the Russian language, and they select a link that will take them to a page that has content only in English, they first receive a notice written in Russian that they are going to a page with English content. And then that way, the user can decide whether they want to proceed to that English-only page or stay on the current page. So that's what an indicator does. Another best practice, and I've talked about telephones a couple times here, telephone numbers connect to an individual who can access a qualified interpreter. And if someone calls that number after hours, voicemail menus are recorded in languages other than English. So if telephone numbers are listed on a website or digital service, the person who receives that call needs to know how to connect to an interpreter or how to enable communication with the LEP person that's calling. The last item here for best practices is vital information. Vital information in footers on the website, disclaimers, and on social media is translated. Because this information is vital and is of critical importance about the services or the programs you provide, it needs to be translated by a competent human translator instead of relying solely on automatic or machine translation services. So that is slide 5, best practices. I'm going to go over a couple effective design practices as well. The first one here is to prominently display multilingual content on your homepage. LEP individuals should be able to easily find content that is written in their language. Language selectors, usually in the upper right part of each page, that's usually where they're placed, allows the LEP user to choose their non-English language, and then they are taken to a site or page with content that has been translated in that language. Instead of using things like flags or icons or a list of languages that is written only in English, the better practice is to have a language selector that's written in the specific non-English language or dialect. So it's easily findable by the LEP individual that comes to that page. Another thing are easy to find links. They should be easy to find and lead to language-specific landing pages with translated content in one or more languages. So those are the 3 things on slide 6 here for effective design that are covered in the guide. The prominent display on the homepage, the language selector, which is usually done in the upper right corner in a lot of the pages that use this in an effective way, and then the easy to find links that lead to language-specific content pages. Usability testing. So on slide 7 here, usability testing, and I want to make sure we define what we mean when we say usability testing. In general, usability testing is a way that we can evaluate a website or digital service by testing it with representative users. Now, if you don't include LEP users in your usability testing, you're not going to be able to identify their usability problems. So including LEP users in that testing is really important. It's also important because you need to have a process for LEP users to test that website or digital service for ease of use. The goal here really is to collect data and to identify those features or components on the website or digital service that are useful to LEP audiences, and also to identify the problems that need to be addressed to improve access for those LEP users. So usability testing is very important. When you're assessing how to improve or new features that you want to add that improve access for LEP users. The next section here, starting on slide 8, are examples. So based on those ideas and considerations that I just talked about, there are many examples in the guide of websites and digital services that have features that support multilingual content and ensure meaningful access for LEP users. The next several slides will provide some examples. So the next slide is slide 9. It is a language selector example. So let me talk about what a language selector is. A language selector is, on a site, that object or that feature that lets an LEP individual choose in a non-English language the language the site will be displayed in. So when I was talking about effective design choices, I mentioned a language selector. These are images on this slide of an effective example of a language selector from the United Nations website. The language selector in the first image is from the welcome page. For both the desktop and mobile versions of the website, it includes this language selector. Now, on the desktop version of the website, which is the second image here, the header of all pages includes the language selector. And you could see the non-English text of the header in this image. Now, in the mobile version of the UN website, the language selector is also included on the mobile menu. And you can see in the last image here that the mobile menu includes the non-English selector. These are important because an LEP user can easily find and select their non-English language. And when they do select that language, they are taken to a page with content in that language. And that's the value of the language selector. From point of entry or any point the person comes to the site or digital service, they can get to content in their language using a language selector. The next slide here, slide 10, is an example of a mirror site. A mirror site, and there's two images on this of a mirror site. A mirror site means that all of the content on an English website is also available in a non-English language on a replica website. So these two images here provide an example. The first image is of the website www.consumer.gov, which is an English website. But that website is also available in Spanish. And the Spanish website not only has content written in Spanish, but it also has a website with a Spanish web address. So that website is www.consumidor.gov. The language toggle button, which you can also see in these two images in the upper right corner of both sides, is also a helpful feature because it allows the user to easily switch between both the Spanish and the English site. So this is really a good example of how to incorporate, and you can even see the design, the colors, the features are very similar and nearly identical on both sites. So this is a good example of a mirror site. The next slide here talks about and presents examples of and images of features and components of a website. So in addition to content, features and components of your website can improve accessibility for LEP users, especially when they're translated into a language other than English. And when they are, LEP users have improved access to your programs, services, and information. So these images here are from the Spanish version of the website usa.gov. And it has many features that provide examples of easy access for users who read Spanish. So these include, and I'm going to talk about these three images on this slide. The first image shows the main menu and the submenus. You can see that each of these are translated into Spanish, and these main menus and submenus are on each page of this site. So they carry over as the user goes to different pages. The second image shows the Spanish words and phrases, that Spanish words and phrases can be used in the search bar. So this is an image of the search bar, and at the top of every page, there is a search bar which can be used, and users can write in Spanish terms that they want to search for on the page. The last image here in the lower right corner of this slide are the instructions for subscription services. And this image is taken from the bottom of the USA.gov Spanish website. And it also is translated into Spanish. It explains in Spanish how to receive more information, how to sign up by email. So these are user features on this slide from USA.gov that show how not just content, but menus and other features of a site can ensure improved access for LEP individuals. Slide 12, and this is from the guide too, provides images from two images of examples of social media. Many entities that have websites also have, not all, but many also have social media accounts. And the reason why they use those is to provide information to the public, which includes LEP individuals. And it's important that these social media accounts also have information in languages other than English. So here are two images from the Center for Disease Control, or CDC. It has two Spanish language social media accounts. You can see the first image here is the Twitter account, which is CDC en Español. And then the second image here is the Facebook account for CDC en Español. And these two social media accounts from the CDC provide translated versions of vital information that you would find on the CDC's English page and social media accounts. So not just on websites, just not on public websites, but all other types of digital service. And this is a good example of using and having translated content on social media accounts. The next slide here, slide 13, presents two images to provide the example about translated page addresses. One way to make sure your website is easier to find for LEP users who read a specific non-English language is to have a website address that matches the language of the content on your translated page. So let's use this example here. This image is of the Spanish version, and there's two images here. First, the English version and the Spanish version. But the English version of the website ready.gov is the first image. Now you'll notice on the Spanish version of the website for ready.gov, the address is different. The address is not ready.gov, it's listo.gov. And listo in Spanish means ready. So here you see how not only is the content in Spanish, but the website address itself is in Spanish, so it's easy to find for a user who reads Spanish. Earlier, you might have also seen, and I pointed it out too, that the website address for the Spanish version of the website consumer.gov was consumidor.gov. And this is because the Spanish word for consumer is consumidor. So that word makes sense for that web address because that is the Spanish version of that web address. So translated page addresses are another way, in addition to content, to direct users and help LEP users find your website in that language. Slide 14 is translated notices. And one of the best practices, and this was mentioned earlier, was having a translated notice that explains to an LEP user that a link that they're about to select will take them to a page that has content only in English, so that they can decide whether to proceed or to stay on the current page. Without that notice, it's very hard for that user to understand they will be going to a page that only has English content. Here, this is an image from the Spanish version of the National Credit Union Administration website. And that website includes these notices, and the notice here is written in Spanish, that indicates to the user in Spanish, you will be going to a page where the content is only available in English. So translated notices are another way to indicate to an LEP user, you are on this page, and you're going to a page that is not going to be in this same language, but the notice itself is translated to ensure the user understands that's where they could be going, and they can choose not to go. Along those lines, on slide 15 here, translated forms. If you collect information or require users to complete forms or applications on your website or some other digital service or portal that you use, providing materials in language other than English ensures meaningful access for LEP users, and that includes the forms that are used on those sites. So here, this is an image of the Spanish version of the website for the Job Corps, so jobcorps.gov/es. Now, the English version of the Job Corps website has an interest form on it. Now, you can see here on the Spanish version of the Job Corps website, this interest form is translated into Spanish and can be submitted into Spanish. So it allows the LEP user to have the same experience that they would on the English page, and also to provide the information and submit the form like any other user would be able to. The last example here on slide 16 is main page links. And the image here is from a US Department of Agriculture website for WIC pre-screening tool. Many times when you have a main page of a website or digital service, you should have some way to indicate the availability of content or portals that are available in other languages. This image of the WIC pre-screening tool, you can see at the bottom, lists several non-English languages. Now, when an LEP user selects one of these languages on this site, they are taken to a translated version of this page where they can then complete this pre-screening tool in that non-English language. So again, similar to the form in the last slide, here, right from the main page, an LEP user can pick that language, complete that form, and submit it, all in content that's been translated into their non-English language. So that's it for examples, the examples portion. And there are several other examples in the guide itself. But it's also important to reference a few resources that were used in the guide and also provide additional information. So a few resources in the guide and that are related to the topics covered today. Slide 17 talks about resources, but the next slide, slide 18, provides you some examples of those resources, and I'm going to go through those. The first, and a lot of people know about this resource already because it's the basis for this presentation, and it's available on lep.gov, is the guide on improving access to websites and digital services for LEP persons. And that was really the basis for a lot of the content today, but the guide has additional information, examples, and resources. The short link for the guide is here on slide 18. You can see that gousa.gov short link. Another resource that's helpful to know about, especially when we're talking about multilingual content, is the digital.gov multilingual community. And you can access that and also join that listserv using the short address that's provided there. Another thing, because machine translation does come up a lot, and I covered it several times here, is this article written by the General Service Administration about automatic translation, good solution or not. And you can read that article at that address. And lastly, I talked about usability testing, and the usability.gov website has a lot of good examples and approaches to develop a usability testing approach. And the short link to that site is located in the last bullet here on slide 18. I wanted to thank everyone for their time, and thank you for joining us for this presentation. If you have any questions about the presentation, you can contact me directly. At this point, we're going to take time for some questions and answers, but please, if you have questions, we're going to cover those in the next section. Thanks for your time.